It's a reconnaissance team. That's kind of hard. That's what. Okay. Member Fitzgerald.
If you don't mind,
Why is there somebody else in here?
okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order our January 8th ABCD Planning and Policy Committee meeting. Clerk, would you mind calling the meeting to order?
Thank you, Chair Garcia. Member Duncan.
Present.
Member Fitzgerald. Member Stiver-Granados.
Here.
Vice Chair Faval. Here. Chair Garcia.
Here. Thank you. Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to address this committee on public communications?
Thank you, Chair Garcia. We have no members of the public wishing to address the board and we're managing the public communication.
Okay. Madam Clerk, the next agenda item is approval of the July 10th statement of proceedings. Are there any members of the public that wish to address the committee on this item?
Thank you, Chair Garcia. There are no members of the public wishing to address the committee on this item.
Does anybody here have any comments on our statement of proceedings from the July meeting? No, I don't either. Okay, can I get a call for a motion for approval of July's statement of proceedings?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Happy to second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes with member Fitzgerald absent. And all remaining board members voting aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The next agenda item is agenda item D1. We will be discussing the Planning and Policy Committee calendar. Madam Clerk, do we have any public testimony?
Thank you, Chair Garcia. We've received no request to speak for this item.
Ms. Corbett?
Sure. If you look in your packets, there's a copy of the calendar that we're proposing for 2026. You'll see that the meetings continue to go opposite the governing board meetings. The one exception I would call your attention is in May when the Planning and Policy Committee would meet in the afternoon. It's listed at 2 o'clock in this calendar, and then we would have our evening budget meeting at 5 p.m. So we would adjust as we get closer to that meeting and see what the agenda looks like. We will adjust the timing of that to ensure that you are not here with a huge big gap between the PPC meeting and the budget meeting in the evening. The other thing just to flag for you is that we will be having appointments for this committee at the February governing board meeting. And so that will happen next month. The other thing, sorry, one last thing to call to your attention is we are proposing to be dark for this committee in July. So just wanted to flag that for your consideration.
That's a quick question.
Yes.
Thank you. I should know this, but I cannot recall. Is there going to be any other member turnover with the regular governing board in 2026? Is that scheduled? Do we know?
To my knowledge, there's no members of the governing board that would be turning over this coming or during this year, but we will be going through the process of appointing alternates, and we'll be coming in February with some proposed changes to the admin code for how that would occur.
Okay, I don't want to go too far afield, but the alternates, they're done by the board as opposed to CSC?
No, the alternates are they're appointed in the same manner that the primary members appointed, but it's clarifying some just process issues that were not addressed in the legislation for the
So I guess CSC will have to be for to appoint them.
correct.
Thank you for the clarification.
When does that happen? Board member that turns out here?
That's right,
Gloria.
member Campbell, I believe, at the end of 2026, correct?
I'm not sure what member comes, but I do know that member Gloria's term ends on August 30th.
Okay, so he would,
And lots of remember end on February 1st, but my assumption, well, not, let me not say my assumption, but I know that the board of supervisors will make their committee appointments, I believe next week.
okay, thank you for that clarification. That's right, the county does, even though they're 4-year terms, technically for all of the governing board members, the county appoints their members for 1-year terms and they reappoint every January. So, technically they could turn over, and then the timing of Mayor Gloria's appointment of the city at-large member would coincide with that August 30th. So he could choose to reappoint himself for the remainder of his term or appoint somebody else.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification.
Also, just for clarification, the public members, alternates will be appointed the same way the public members
That's correct.
after an interview, and then the governing board elected. Public elected members will be voting on those, correct? Is that how that works?
So the procedures are for the appointment of the public members are laid out in the admin code, and yes, they are appointed by the full governing board. And so our proposal would be to have the alternates go through that same process.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you for
Sure.
the question, member Duncan. Madam Clerk, is there any members of the public that want to address the committee on this item?
Thank you, Chair Burke Garcia. There are no members of the public wishing to address the board on this item.
Any other questions or comments on this agenda item? Can I get a motion to approve the 2026 calendar for the Planning and Policy Committee?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? With member Fitzgerald absent, that motion passes with those board members who are present voting aye.
Thank you. And now for the big meat of this meeting, it says D1 on here, but it's agenda D2. Is San Diego County Air Pollution Control District, our legislative update for 2026. Madam Clerk, do you mind providing the public testimony announcement?
Thank you, Chair Burke Garcia. I would note for the record that speaker slips are no longer accepted for this item and that we have received no request to speak on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner Corbett.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair Burke Garcia and members of the Planning and Policy Committee. So this item is to consider our 2026 legislative program. This is an annual legislative program that we've been doing for the last several years after we split out from the county. The proposed action is for you to consider the program and recommend its approval by the governing board. And our intent is to bring it forward to the governing board at their February meeting. I'm joined today by our program coordinator for government and public relations, Selena Mesa. And in the presentation, we'll provide a recap of our 2025 legislative program activities, as well as an overview of our proposal for the program in 2026, including revised priorities and guidelines and updates regarding the development of our legislative advocacy work. Next slide, please. So just to provide a quick recap of our 2025 legislative program, we, at the February 13th, 2025 meeting, the governing board adopted the 2025 legislative program, and that established our federal and state guidelines and priorities that aligned with the district's mission. And so the program includes guidelines that allow staff to act on critical matters that may require immediate decision-making and could affect the district, and cover the areas of air quality, public health, environmental justice, climate change, and funding. And each year we continue to grow our legislative program. And in the past year, we issued 19 letters of legislative and funding support. There were 11 air quality related bills that we were tracking that were signed. And then through strategic connections that we formed with other districts through the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, We also participated in 2 webinars for state legislative staff to provide an overview of the AB 617 Community Air Protection Program, as well as an overview of general air district function and jurisdiction. So those were called Understanding Air Districts, and they were put on by the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and we were fortunate to participate with them and several of the other large districts in those webinars. So I'm going to now turn it over to Melina to provide an update regarding our 2025 priorities.
Thank you, Paula. Every year at the beginning of the legislative session, we prioritize bills based on whatever is based on our legislative program priorities and guidelines. This past year, one of the bills from the 2025 legislative program priorities that was chaptered was AB 652, which was introduced by Assemblymember Alvarez. AB 652 implements alternate members to our governing board selection process. And in addition to that, it applies minor amendments to our governing board structure that kind of adds revision, that adds amendments to AB 423. Those amendments are staggered term limits for 2 city selection committees appointees and 2 public members. The members will be selected through a random process in 2029 and will serve 2-year terms. It also removes the requirement that board members appointed to serve as the San Diego Park representative and the military liaison must be a county supervisor. Lastly, it also clarifies the appointees. It clarifies the appointees selected through the city selection committee, that they can be a mayor or a city council member. And then, as we previously spoke, staff is currently working on implementing that bill. Next slide.
I have a question about the alternates. When will that process happen?
So what we're planning to do is come to the governing board with a more detailed update, as well as some proposed amendments to the admin code. One would clarify the term of those alternates would be coinciding with the term of the primary member. The legislation was silent on that. Another would be just kind of clarifying that appointment process. And then, so that would happen in February. Then we would reach out to the clerk to schedule a special meeting of the city selection committee so that those alternates could be appointed. The county is going through their appointment process now. I believe they actually appointed an alternate last year. So even though it didn't end up being effective that way, they have 2 full members. And then we also are in contact with the mayor's office, so they're aware that they can appoint an alternate. And then for the public members, I would anticipate we'd be prepared to do that in April at that governing board meeting.
Next slide. Another priority bill that was chaptered this past legislative cycle is AB 14, which was introduced by Assemblymember Hart. AB 14 expands the vessel speed reduction program statewide to help reduce air pollution and endangered whale populations. The Port of San Diego currently already operates a VSR program, and we will be engaging with them to integrate the program wherever it's most appropriate. Next slide. Before we move on to our proposed 2026 legislative priorities, I'll provide a quick recap of the 2025 legislative priorities. So this was a tough budget year, and some of our programs, including our community air protection program, faced higher budget cuts in the upcoming budget year. However, through advocacy and in partnership with other impacted air districts, we were able to secure $100 million in GGR funding, and in 2025-26, and in 250 million in sustained funding through through SB 840. The new GGRF bill will be implemented in the FY 25-27 FY 26-27 budget.
I'm sorry, Melina, can you remind me what GGRF is again?
Sorry, greenhouse gas reduction.
Reduction.
Yeah.
That's
Sorry
the
about that.
cap and trade
No,
capital
now
investment.
that you said it, I
Like
remember.
all the
I just-
acronyms, I know it gets redundant after a while. While we receive the lower amount for this upcoming year, it will help avoid complete funding cut to the program and significant program interruptions. These funding allocations will allow us to continue our work to reduce air pollution in our 8617. And although we were unable to introduce a DMV funding increase this past year, we will continue to work to identify consistent funding initiatives and opportunities in the upcoming. Next slide, please. Other 2025 legislative priorities, including supporting legislation that addresses the root cause of the sewage flows into Tijuana River Valley and funding to support SDAPCD programs that help address the root cause of the crisis, such as our air purifier distribution program and hydrogen sulfide monitoring. Lastly, increasing our resources to support county-wide air quality related odor incidences.
May I ask a quick question?
Mhm.
The first bullet point at the top, so if we see something that there's something in front of Congress or something like that, and we want to ask for a support letter, that we would go to you, and if it's in our legislative guidelines, like we would simply do that route. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the intent.
That's the purpose.
Once the board adopts the program, the intent is we could be able to move.
Okay, because yeah, there's quite a few things often,
Mhm.
such as the annual budget for the IPWC, construction development budget has to be approved and everything.
Mhm. Yeah, and certainly board members may be aware of opportunities that we're not as aware of, and we'd be happy to provide support.
We can also provide letters of support if there's maybe like a funding that is in line with our guidelines as well.
Feel like a separate
Yeah.
grant program or something on that line.
And you can always, if you like, you can also provide my email address. I usually am the one that receives a request for letters of support.
Okay, great, thank you. And I know we may get to some of it later, but it does addresses the root cause of the sewage flows, but a lot of sometimes what we talk about is addressing the effects of it with the county, which is different, very different than the root cause. So I don't know when we get to that language, if you want to expand it a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'd like to remind you, this is for the 2025 priority.
Right.
I'll go over the 2026 one.
Gotcha. Thank you.
No problem. And then, like I said, we were, the county related odor incidents, we're pleased to report that, through the generosity of Supervisor Tara Lawson Reamer, we secured funding to purchase a mobile monitoring van and are currently in the final phases of the project, and we'll keep board members, updated as we continue to complete this project. Next slide, please. I'm also going to provide a quick overview of our legislative policy guidelines and a brief recap of our 2025 guidelines. The first one that we have is air quality standards to protect public health and prevent adverse health effects from elevated levels of contaminants. Environmental justice to emphasize the reduction of localized air pollution and health risks in underserved communities, increasing transparency and ensuring funding for programs. Public health addresses the impacts of air pollution by supporting emission reductions and research-based policy decisions. Climate change to support initiatives that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and expand zero emission technologies. Finally, funding to secure and expand sustainable funding sources for air quality programs and compliance with state and federal mandates. In 2025, we added 3 guidelines. And they were under environmental justice. We added support legislation, which reduces cumulative health risk from mobile and stationary sources of air pollution, especially in underserved communities. Under public health, we added support legislation and administrative actions that assess air contaminant impacts on public health based on new research and findings. And lastly, for climate change, we added supports that will support projects that will facilitate the expansion of zero emission technologies, including the sustainable development and expansion of the power grid. And I'll pass it back to Paula to go over the 2026.
Thank you. Go on to the next slide. So the proposed priorities, we have summarized here, but the actual language is in the first part of the legislative program. So the first one is identifying increased funding to support core functions and operations. That's gonna continue to be a priority, for the foreseeable future. And this could continue to be in the form of seeking a increase for our DMV fees. Again, we are working with statewide partners, because a lot of air districts are facing budget challenges as a result of DMV fees being stagnant since 2010. And those fees are used to, provide funding for some of our core functions like monitoring, like planning. And those haven't increased since 2010 as a result of Prop 26. So we're going to be continuing to look at that as a potential. As a reminder, we get $4 of every vehicle registration on an annual basis in the county to support our programs. Other just including electric. There's still emissions from electric vehicles, but not certainly to the same extent as a gas powered vehicle. And other districts, most other districts get at least $6. So we were already a little bit behind even in 2010. Some districts get up more like $18 per vehicle per year. So it can be a substantial source of funding for districts. Again, it goes to support those core programs. So you'll be hearing more about that as we explore opportunities and talk with our statewide partners to see what, options there might be. Then we're going to obviously continue to support legislative efforts to resolve the Tijuana River Valley crisis, identifying program funding, hopefully for the air purifier program. And I take your comment about looking at the root cause, but also if you look at the language on page 3 of the legislative program, it mentions that root cause language, also mentions looking for legislation that would provide resources for monitoring and purifier efforts. So if you think that we need some language changes to
Well, I
address your
can't
concerns,
necessarily think of what else it might be, but I think, it's pretty easy to add a few words that unless it's gonna create a problem on some timeline, we could add.
no,
a few
this
words
is
that
the time to do that.
But also, it's the root cause of the, but you could also say, either there or the next, either one that would fit where you could, and support legislation that mitigates the effects of the.
Yeah.
Do you want to remember a crisis, or you could say the.
Yeah, we can definitely make language changes there.
I said I like your lawyer.
Oh. Yeah, like the only thing that you think want to stand there, we'll be like, hey, can you say, how do you think we should say that?
I like that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm taking over.
I totally agree with Member Duncan. I didn't like that root cause, especially I do
Got
think
it.
mitigate. Had I typed up a sentence, thinking about this, because our brains were on the same wavelength. I was thinking about supporting legislation that funds and accelerates cross-border wastewater infrastructure solutions. I'm trying to move away from the language of odors and sewage, because now we know it's a lot more than just that. And so I'm thinking some sort of language that talks about those solutions. And I know it says it in there, but maybe being very more explicit about expansion of toxics monitoring. We talk about hydrogen sulfide, super important low hanging fruit, but also if there's other air toxics that need to be monitored. And I guess lastly, just saying that we could also, and this is something I'll have some language for also in the public health data section as well, but integrating health outcome tracking. So we already do risk assessment type stuff, but if the county health is now a little bit more open to the idea of sharing data across the table, that we could do some health outcome tracking along with our job is the air quality monitoring, but partnership with the county to look at health outcomes that's related to some of those exposures. So there could be language in there that just talks about supporting those efforts to cross-pollinate that health outcome tracking. Not saying we're tracking the health outcomes,
Right.
but that the people that are tracking them, that we can talk to each other about how to do that better.
So, okay, so maybe we can, that's in the guidelines, is that language that you're suggesting for the guidelines
Mhm.
themselves? Okay,
It's a little related to
The language that's already in there.
In the public health outcomes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of-
so there's if you look at, we'll get to the guidelines in a second. But I just want to make sure I've understood your comment on the priority. And so what you said you have language to suggest that might be broader, looking at cross-border wastewater solutions
Yes,
and
and like,
focusing on monitoring that's broader than hydrogen sulfide.
Correct.
Okay,
and like what member Duncan said too, adding that mitigation.
right, the mitigating effect.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And part of the way you can make it broader too, is you could just run that, for legislative efforts to resolve Tijuana River Valley crisis and identify program funding. You could say including but not limited to,
Mhm.
Mhm.
addressing the root sources as well as the effect.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay.
So that would have to be used, supporting any legislative effort to resolve,
Right,
including but not limited to.
okay. Okay. Anything else on the Tijuana River priority before we move to the next one? Okay, so then the next one, is related to Air District CARB member compensation. So right now, Mayor Gloria serves as our representative to CARB. He does not receive any additional compensation for that. Other members of CARB are compensated at a level that is specified in state law. And that CARB, now that we have AB 652 has passed, any member of the governing board could be selected to be the CARB representative. So other districts around the state have been concerned that we are one of 5 districts that has a sitting member on CARB. And unfortunately, at this point, none of those air district representatives to CARB get additional compensation for their service. So there's been legislation that was proposed last year that would have those members be compensated at a level that is commensurate with the other members of CARB, since they're doing the same work and spending the same time on it. It's now a 2-year bill. We haven't seen if it's going to come back, but if it does, it would be coming back this January. And so this is, we did take a support position on it last year, and this would be continuing that as a priority and as support.
Do you have any idea, just briefly, what the compensation is for CARB members that are compensated now?
It varies. I want to say it's in the realm of about 50,000, but I'd have to look it
Per
up.
annum?
Yes,
for what?
per year, but I'd have to look it up. So I think the chair is, because the chair is
That's a
intended.
Pay raise.
I'd like to volunteer to lead policy and planning.
I should look that up before answering categorically. I know that the chair position is compensated more because it's intended to be a full-time position. The others are assumed to be just as, part.
Yeah.
But that's something that maybe we can look up and get back to you on that. What that is. So that's the third priority. That would stay, the proposal for that stays the same as last year. And then next is looking at potential for state legislation related to indirect source emissions. Last year, there was legislation that was proposed to clarify CARB's authority to regulate indirect sources of emissions. That was made into a 2-year bill. It may come back, but we're understanding that if it comes back, there would be some pretty significant language changes. So we've got it here as a watch position. We don't know exactly what that would look like. But just to keep an eye on that, since we're in the process of considering an indirect source strategy, we'll be coming back to the board in February on that. And certainly this is something that could impact. That's one way about it. So that was here as a watch.
And I don't even know, maybe it's support potentially, do you think it's something the board would want to consider?
I think it could be, again, depending on what's in it. And I think it could be a support position that we would come back to either the board or the planning and policy committee with. Or if we know we just would like to support a statewide strategy on that, we could certainly put it as a support here, but it's just without being, you know, we just weren't sure.
Right, I mean, I see what's, but for me, the concept is, and I know we've talked about it briefly on twofold, you didn't necessarily say this part, but for me, I hate having the employees here work on something if it's not going to necessarily be necessary, because you have so much other work to do. So, you know, for me, it's almost like if it's likely to pass, we never really know, but if it's likely to pass, then it would be great to use your efforts for something that, you know, you're working on other items.
Right.
And I do think a uniform policy for all would be better anyway.
And that's, I think if staff had a preference, that would be our preference as well, to see a statewide consistency, certainly. And so again, those are more discussions that we'll be having related to the February. Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
We're all 12, right? Okay, so that's the priorities. You know?
And before we move on, can I go back to the DMV?
Yes.
So right now you said it's $4. What are you, what number are you thinking? Is it gonna be an increase, or is it just gonna be something that's
So,
increasing registration fees, or is it something that's just from what they already?
you know, I think there's a few different ways that we could approach it. And one is to look at what a straight CPI increase would be from a 2010 level. And if we were to do that, the rough kind of estimate is it would be a $6 fee instead of a $4 fee. So a $2 increase on an annual basis, you know, that would provide us an additional approximately 5 million in revenue, which is really substantial for us. And those funds are intended to be used for reduction of emissions from motor vehicles. And because motor vehicles are such a big source of our inventory and a big reason that we are out of attainment for air quality standards, it makes sense for us to be, you know, trying to maximize funding to be able to reduce emissions from those vehicles, right? But we don't have jurisdiction to regulate them, but we can do it through incentive projects. So DMV dollars are intended to be used for those types of incentive projects, but also they can be used for related planning and monitoring and things like that. Again, a huge portion of our inventory is coming from mobile sources, and so it makes sense that we try to make sure that our revenues are reflecting that.
And it would be up to DMV to decide if they just increase the registration by $2 or just, if it's not, that makes.
So technically, the board could vote to increase them, but because of Prop 26, it would then need to go to a vote of the entire county. The other way to do it would be to do it through the legislature, but there you would need to get a 2/3 vote. So in any event, it's not a simple process, but going through the legislature seems perhaps more likely for success than going through a vote locally.
Yeah.
But too fine to do that, but I think we all have experience with local initiatives and how difficult that can be. So anyway, like I say, there's going to be a lot more conversations about that, but it's a difficult position for districts across the state because those funds have been frozen in time. And we also get subvention funding from CARB that is also laid out in state law, but those funds have not been increased. That actually goes back further, so since 1975. And subvention. And so that's another potential avenue that we might seek to get additional funding. but that would be coming out of the state budget. The state is currently projecting an $18 billion deficit in the coming fiscal year, so that's, you know, a tall order as well. So again, we're trying to look at different options, open to further discussion on that and other ideas that people may have, but we're continuing to have these discussions with our statewide partners as well. You're welcome. Okay, so if there's no other questions on the priorities, we'll move on to propose additional guidelines. And we're proposing 2 additional, and these were based on some of the priorities from last year and ongoing priorities. And so one would be in the, or I'm sorry, they're both in the air quality section. So these are listed as numbers 13 and 14 in the air quality section of the program. And the first is to support creation of regional air quality incident response centers. So supporting air quality related incident monitoring and response efforts. And so as you recall, we reached out to South Coast in September of 2024 when odors were so terrible in the Tijuana River Valley, and they sent their mobile monitoring van down. We're in the process of getting that a mobile resource here for hydrogen sulfide, but we don't have the level of resources that a agency like South Coast has in order to be able to respond to air quality incidents. And so last year they had proposed a legislative item to fund 3 regional response centers that could be housed out of air districts in order to be able to deploy to smaller districts that don't have those on-demand monitoring resources. So it could be used in the event of a wildfire, in the event of some other kind of air quality crisis. So think maybe ship fire from a few years ago, or something like the Tijuana River Valley. So that's something that we supported at the time. Again, statewide budget challenges, it didn't move, but I think there's still interest statewide in getting those types of centers funded at some point. And then the last one again relates back to the indirect sources of pollution. Here we have it supporting statewide legislation that would clarify CARB authority to regulate them. Slightly nuanced, different than supporting them doing it, but just to make to clarify that they're able to do it. And so those are the 2 we would propose to have. All right, next slide, please. All right, and so then in terms of continued program development, we're continuing, you know, as we mentioned, to expand our efforts in this area, building stronger partnerships, expanding engagement with the local delegation. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we've been partnering with several of our air districts around the state on these educational webinars. We're going to be continuing to do that. These are webinars for legislative staff from the state, from all around the state. And as I understand, there's been like 40 to 50 attendees of legislative staff from around the state of those. They provide an overview of air district functions, including monitoring, planning, incentives, and budget and other district programs. And the intent of these is really to educate legislative staff about what air districts do, so that when we're coming to say, hey, we need additional funding for these programs, there's a much better depth of knowledge as to what those funds would be used for. Currently, you know, they've heard a lot from us about the AB 617 program. We've been successful with our statewide partners in getting additional funding dedicated for that program. They hear a lot about the incentive programs like Carl Moyer that are routinely being granted, but those funds don't cover our core programs. So that's really what we're trying to educate folks about, so that they understand when we come back and need additional funding for those core programs, what the basis of that is. We're also talking about having a potential capital day with the air districts up in Sacramento, again, to be able to advocate for these priorities. So that statewide partnership has been really productive. And then this year, I'm also the chair of the CAPCOA Legislative Committee. So I'm able to put a little bit more emphasis on some of our priorities, which has been great. All right, with that, I think we are at the end of the presentation. So the action again is to consider the legislative program and recommend approval by the governing board.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to address the committee?
Thank you, Chair Burkett Garcia. There are no members of the public that wish to address the committee on this item, and I would like to note for the record that Member Fitzgerald joined the meeting.
Thank you. Comment about this agenda item? Paula, did you want to add?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious to so new to this process, so thank you for sharing this. I think they look really fabulous. I think I spent some time thinking about them and wondering what is the process to add any new guidelines or clarify language? Because I just have a few really minor suggestions to help sort of not expand, I guess sort of expand and accentuate some of the pieces, especially around environmental justice, public health.
Mm-hmm. So, once the language is, so we can make changes to language here, that's the point of this committee, and then propose it to the governing board. Depending on kind of how many you have, and what the pleasure of the committee is, I would think that you could make those proposals and then
We can discuss it.
the committee can discuss it, and then we can bring it forward at the governing board. The governing board has the ultimate decision as to the program as a whole. And then what we would do is reflect any of those changes in, so that the governing board could see that.
So I just had a few, it wasn't a lot, I wasn't like, I don't have a whole page of them, but I just had a few. And it might be that the language is in there, and it just, maybe there's a way to tweak some of the current language or add this to it. One of them was, again, I'll go back to the support efforts to integrate health surveillance. So, with air quality data to quantify health impact, that would drive evidence-based policy. So that's the language I developed. I have that, I'm happy to share that with everybody. But basically, it's just supporting the effort to do such a thing. I don't know, maybe this has been done in the past, but I noticed that disconnect between the county health and air quality data sometimes. And so I think as we're starting to now understand, especially during like the Tijuana River public health crisis, they're collecting health data, we're collecting health data, you've got the air quality data, so it'd be really great to just support that effort to combine the surveillance efforts. So the language again, I was suggesting with support effort to integrate health surveillance with air quality data to quantify health impact and drive evidence-based policy. I don't know about that last part, but I like that part.
So one thing we might encounter with that is we're screening for legislation to follow and watch and take positions on.
Mhm.
We are typically looking for one specific to air quality. So we would catch something like that. That would be the one thing I would flag, is that we would catch something like that if legislation were proposed to assist with that or to require something new of like a county health department to be able to assist with that integration. We would catch it if it's related to air quality, but we might not if it's solely specific to what a county health department is doing.
Mhm.
That said, if we put a statement like that in the legislative guidelines and somebody flagged it for us, we could certainly do that. I'm just not sure we would always be, if that makes sense. So proactively, I don't know that we would see it, but we could certainly.
I feel like it aligns with the emergency response point that you have about developing these emergency response centers. Because if that's the case, if these centers do get developed, that health outcome surveillance is going to be attached to that with the air quality data. Sort of like how they were doing with the wildfires in LA, similarly, or to a couple of like the incidents with like hydrogen sulfide and things like that up in the South Coast Air Quality Management District. They have to track those health outcome data along with the air quality. So, but I just don't know if we currently with APCD have that mechanism in place. And if we don't, I see what you're saying though, that it might not necessarily, we're not gonna go out and collect health data. And if the
Well, I
county's
guess-
already doing it, then.
I guess what I'm saying is we wouldn't be looking for legislation requiring someone to track health data, if that makes sense, because these are specific to legislation that we would be supporting, opposing, tracking. And so,
We're looking for a partnership between two
Yeah.
people under this, with
Which
not,
is
not
not-
legislative.
Yeah,
right,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And so if there were legislation that said county health departments will do a better job of sharing data with air pollution control districts.
that's nice. There's a new bill out there, right? Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'm making you choke.
Maybe somebody.
Don't upset Paula.
No.
Excuse me. I guess I was just gonna say was, supporting any legislation that mandates data transparency and community access to real-time air quality data. Which we're already doing that with the hydrogen sulfide data. So I don't know if that's gonna be something that comes up through, like, I think, what is it, AB 1647 has that with its, fence line communities for petroleum industry. And so there could be some stuff coming up soon that talks about, making sure real-time data in health crisis or these air quality crises are becoming more available. So I think I'm seeing some legislation starting to come, potentially get developed around that. So I don't know if that's something that we could support.
I think it's up to the committee. I mean, that's something that, I'm sorry, could you say that language again?
Support legislation that mandates data transparency and community access to real-time air quality data.
It's something that we would certainly catch, and if it's, the only thing I would flag for the committee members is the cost to the district. There's a cost to the district associated with that. So certainly we can support that legislation, but being mindful that there's definitely cost with that. It's we're going through that right now for all of our routine monitoring data. We have the hydrogen sulfide level on our website, but for our routine monitoring data, we're still struggling to get that information on the website. We're working through that just from a technical basis.
What would the support look like that would help that be successful?
Resources, including resources to address IT issues from the district.
So I think that, no unfunded mandates.
That would be the thing, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, not my pothole.
I was thinking in the case of like AB 1647, the petroleum industry funds that, right? They have to force to
Right.
fund that.
Right,
And it's like, say with the Tijuana River, IBWC, I mean, somebody's gotta pay for those monitors and the data to be out there, and so far, CPP's been, paying the bill for the real-time monitors that are out there right now, so but if something came through that said there was some sort of mandate that IBWC be responsible for air monitoring of wastewater impacts, they could support paying for those monitors in the community that's being impacted.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would look like, but it kind of reminds me of like fence line communities with the petroleum industry. Somebody's held accountable for that. I don't think we can ask Mexico to pay for it, but we could.
We just asked for the paper, massive amount, and they signed an agreement to do it. And
Like a patrol.
Right?
yeah,
Did.
right,
So if there's funding available through that,
right, yeah, if it's not an unfunded mandate, then that, like,
Definitely, yeah.
right? So I don't know how the committee wants to handle it in terms of the actual specific language.
Well, on those ones, we could, because I don't know if there's a specific bill that addresses the way we would want it to be right now, but we could track those things and maybe recommend to legislators that this is what we want.
So my preference would be to And I'm fine if people want to go into it deeper and vote on it, but maybe we vote to recommend what we have, unless there's other changes recommended. And then also vote to have the alternate or additional, what's something called the additional language you're proposing in those three places, as, you know, as you said, sort of like bolded or highlighted as
Mhm.
potential additional language recommended by you for the governing board to consider. I'm not sure right now without looking at it again, if that specific language exactly, I mean, the other concept I don't have a problem with. One thing I would like to make clear though, is that if it, whether or not it imposes a duty on the APCD beyond, you know, supporting legislation, you know.
Right.
And what does that look like? Like, I'm happy, I want transparency and,
Mhm.
but what do you have to do? So, but, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but.
We could certainly do it that way. And then if there's, you know, we could then propose some changes to the priority language on the Tijuana River,
Or do that the same way.
Mitigating.
and do that the same way and.
I actually, sorry, are you done? Okay, I actually kind of want to split it a little. I like the language that you proposed about and Paul proposed about the mitigating on the Tijuana River Valley. So if the rest of the committee is okay with it, I would like to vote to propose that to the governing board with that changed language. And then secondly, the stuff that we're just addressing at this part of the meeting, the other two or three bullet points that Paula just did, just mentioned, you know, like bolded so that we can discuss it with the governing board, but I really like that first language we discussed during the presentation.
Yeah, and even if,
So,
I was gonna say, even if, I mean, we could also, you know, show the change we made on the
Yes,
Tijuana River one, but
I
then
would
we
like
could vote to approve it.
Redline that.
And then the other one, we're not voting against it.
Right.
We're just voting to have it then considered.
Yeah.
Because it's more complex.
I'm looking at Marvy.
Are we allowed?
Got
Is it?
Put it on two separate motions,
It sounds,
two separate motions.
That's what I'm proposing, but I don't know what
Or-
the committee.
Well,
it could be one motion. Right.
Is to amend the current language for the Tijuana River Valley,
Yeah,
to include mitigating effects,
mitigating effect.
mitigating effects of the Tijuana River Valley, and to consider additional language regarding public health data and environmental justice. I think we
And
had one
and
under
data transparency.
and
Data
data
transparency.
transparency, mandates data transparency and community access to real-time air quality data.
I think the only thing that I would mention for the health one is that we don't have any like health experts within the agency. So I always caution with that in terms of how we add that into the guidelines, just because we don't want to state that we are a health agency. But we want to make sure that it's always clear that the county is.
Perhaps Paula could email her language to you and then you
Yeah.
can.
That's what I was hoping.
Fine.
Yeah.
See if there's a way to
Yeah.
tweak it or,
Okay,
but then again, I'm new to this, so I was just like, I have these ideas, but I understand now, nothing happens without a cost and you don't have money, so. Thanks for.
okay.
Can do one motion for that.
So I'd like to make a motion, if it's okay with the committee, that we approve the 2026 legislative update with the new language under it was the Tijuana River.
I think that's
Priority.
Yeah.
Priority two.
Priority two, to add the mitigating language. You have that written down, right? And that mitigates the effects of the Tijuana River Valley. And, highlight the additional language for public health data transparency. And what was the third one? Oh, is that?
That's it.
That's it, those two. if that is okay with the rest of the committee, or anybody else has a different way of wording the motion, I'm happy to.
No, I think it's great. The only thing I just wanted to add is I'll say, direct staff to come up with the actual way. You know, because they are on.
Right,
That would direct
Go back and
staff to come up with the language.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well
I
said.
told you I love this. Again. I can't think of those words that way. Okay.
Okay, are you good?
I'm done. Could we get it?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
There we go.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes with all the committee members being present and voting out.
Thank you. And I think that is our last agenda item for today.
I'd like to make a comment before we close
Sure,
today.
absolutely.
So environmental justice, and I caught the back end of what you were speaking of. Talking about outreach, transparency. I would really highly recommend, that you consider having the representatives from the public outreach, that public outreach specialist for environmental justice come and speak to, before your council. They came to Escondido, I invited them to Escondido. It was so informative. The community members responded so well because they don't know what we're doing. And I think that would be such a great avenue to really start getting the word out. So I'm gonna be inviting them back. I do a government affairs, and that's a private community thing, not government, not city government related, but government affairs that covers anything. And, that's a whole different audience. And I think that's just a really good way to start that outreach. People are just so appreciative when we hear all the good that's being done, because they just don't have time to listen in,
Sure.
So, but it made it to the paper, it was in the paper, there was a lot of social media on it. And so I really think outreach is just so important. And I hope that we would all consider doing our part and doing what we can in our city.
Nancy would be
Thank you so
definitely
much.
interested.
Yeah, but
We
thank
love
you
it.
to the staff for doing such an amazing job and just so much good information. It was mind blowing for a lot of people.
Thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity for facilitating.
Hey, do you think even simply the board might want an update on that in the presentation? Because I'm not that up to speed on it. I sometimes ask questions during meetings of you, like, what does this mean? And then I don't exactly know what we're doing.
Well, that's the same one that Solen gave to us.
Okay.
Maybe 3 months ago.
Okay, I don't know.
I think it was October, I wanna say.
Yeah,
so-
yeah.
But certainly we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
come back, or if,
There's
there's
any
an
updates,
opportunity,
yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Or I guess maybe where there's like success or the effects are really working.
Mhm.
Would be interesting to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, the community really responded because they said, wow, we are the new county.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, I'd like to adjourn this meeting, and our next planning and policy committee meeting will be in March.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Maybe we should make a motion, just have all of the ABCD governing board stuff just done by us. 'Cause that was very
Yeah,
good.
that was